Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Strengthening Black Entrepreneurship Learning Growth Series. Today's topic is financial management and access to capital. We're going to give folks a minute or two to join, and we'll be right back to start off the webinar. We know a lot of people have stuff going on during the day and are just coming in from back-to-back meetings. So let's give folks a second or two to join. Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Strengthening Black Entrepreneurship Learning Growth Series. Today's topic is financial management and access to capital. We're so glad you decided to join us today. We know you have a busy day, and we're thankful that we're a part of your day. Some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be mailed to registrants and available within 1 week. All webinar attendees are muted to ensure sound quality. Ask a question or share your thoughts anytime by typing into the text box panel of the GoToWebinar control panel. If you experience any technical issues, please email gotomeeting@prosperitynow.org. Getting the most out of today's call, we invite you to join from a quiet space. Grab a coffee or a snack and settle in. Engage. Send us your questions and comments as you listen. Reflect on ways to apply what you learned to your own work today. For our group discussion and Q&A, we invite you all to ask the speakers any questions using the chat box. Also add your reflections and ideas for conversation. You can discuss how you think relationships with funders can improve, or share what exciting strategies you have seen or have used to mitigate challenges and restraints. For the group discussion technology, please ensure that you are typing into the questions on the control panel in your GoToWebinar control panel, please. Before we continue with today, Prosperity Now's mission is to ensure everyone in our country has a clear path to financial wealth, stability, and prosperity. Without further ado, I welcome Joel Hughley to join us and start off this webinar.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. Welcome, and my name is Joelle Hughley. I'm the Senior Program Manager at Prosperity Now. First, I'd like to say again, thank you all for joining us as we kick off the first webinar in our series of the Learn and Grow series for Strengthening Black Entrepreneurship. So today we're going to talk about financial management. And really that means we are pulling out insights from our playbook, which we will share with you all in the chat, so you can have that as a reference for later. But really we'll talk about the barriers, the opportunities, points of leverage, and best practices from the CDFIs, high-performing CDFIs that we've collaborated with to create this playbook and resources. So with that, I'd like to dig in and talk about what we're going to cover in today's agenda. Next slide. All right, so we reviewed housekeeping and some welcoming things. Next, we're going to give you some background and provide context to the state of the racial economic equity for CDFIs of color to provide a baseline and explain why we're doing this work and why it's important. Next, we'll review leveraging capital and really understanding the lending terms, how to negotiate that, funding relationship, funder support, as well as looking into collective assets to leverage as well. We'll provide some practitioner insights. They'll give you some information and provide some opinions and things that have worked for them, as well as cover some key aspects from the playbook. From there, we'll move into a group panel and discussion. I'll start that off with some questions. We'll open it up to the audience and looking to get some questions from you all to engage. We'll end that with next steps and close out from there. So without further ado, I want to introduce our fearless leader, Ebony White, to provide some context.
All right. Thank you, Joelle. I want to thank everyone for being with us today. I'm so excited that you took the time out of your busy days to be with us. Just before I get started, just for those who may not be familiar with Prosperity Now, we are a national organization and we work to drive economic opportunity for all and to really try to help others to build an equitable economic um, pathways and power within their communities. We work to create some impactful systemic change by centering those who have been historically excluded. We work to amplify community rooted solutions and energize them through our research, advocacy, policy, and narrative change. And so, as Joelle mentioned, I am the director of, senior director, excuse me, of programs. And today is really the result of being some thought partners with 5 high impact performance CDFIs who have a specific focus on really trying to support entrepreneurship. And we do have a focus around black entrepreneurship with this specific body of work, which is being funded by Wells Fargo, and they're open for business funds. So I do want to take this time to thank Wells Fargo for your investment and your partnership. With this partnership, we have the opportunity to really expand our support to CDFIs to help improve their capacity, their ability to scale, and to also build on their leadership. Through the CDFI playbook that was mentioned, which I hope you all have a copy of. If not, I know we will definitely put it in the chat box for you. But it's really the CDFI playbook is a guide. It's a guide for small to medium sized CDFIs who are looking to scale, who also have a focus on supporting entrepreneurs of color. So it's really a two lens that we're hoping to be able to provide to you guys today. And now with this Learn and Grow series, it's an opportunity for us to really lift up those best practices that's in the CDFI playbook. Next slide, please. So we have an economy that is just not working for everyone because it was not intended to do so or structured to do so. We know from a lot of data that households of color and those with low incomes have been excluded by design from building sustainable wealth, and they continue to face systemic barriers that prevent them from participating in and benefiting from our economic system. We also know that small businesses and entrepreneurs of color in particular were hit really bad in regards to the pandemic. And many of them had to close their doors, and many of them are still trying to struggle to become stable again. And we also know that small businesses is really one of the main core functions of our communities. And so with that in mind, with the Learn and Grow series, we're really looking at CDFIs because they are the ones who are really supporting these small businesses and entrepreneurs that we're talking about. They literally are the front lines of relief for a lot of vulnerable communities, which includes small businesses. They can be considered banks, credit unions, loan funds, venture funds. And so, they definitely have multiple ways in which they're supporting communities. However, in this breath, we're really trying to bring the lens of those who are providing loans as well as technical assistance to entrepreneurs and businesses. And so, just real quickly, this in regards to what we're looking to do, as Joelle mentioned, this is a 3-part webinar series where we will talk about financial management, data management, and technical assistance. While we know that there's definitely a lot more topics that CDFIs have to really consider when trying to think about how they scale, these are the top 3 that our partners really want to prioritize for people to really lean into. We also will hope to identify some of the challenges specific to smaller size CDFIs that are led by people of color, given that there is definitely a lot of gaps in regards to the level of investment that goes into them, as well as some of the limitations that they are really struggling to oversee in regards to supporting their clients. And we also want to lift up some best practices and some some ideas and recommendations on how to be more effective and how to really think about different ways in which you can scale, as well as different ways and considerations that you should think about when you're thinking about how you really support entrepreneurs of color in this space. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of, honestly, things that I can speak to, and I'm going to speak to them actually in a minute, around some of the challenges when it comes to smaller CDFIs, especially those that are BIPOC led. However, what I'm going to do just to provide one example as to how there is some disparities in regards of the type of resources that they have access to. So as I mentioned, CDFIs, they are the front lines for communities, especially low to moderate income communities. They are also granted a CDFI accreditation by the U.S. Treasury Fund. And that's really based on the fact that they have a commitment on increasing financial access to underserved communities. However, the challenge is when we look at some of the data, and this is from 2017, we can clearly see that white-led CDFIs, they hold 8 times the amount of capital than BIPOC-led CDFIs. We also can see from some of the data also that white-led CDFIs have outpaced minority-owned awardees every year. Across all the years, the high point of the minority CDFIs have never exceeded the lowest number of white-owned awardees. And so not only are white-led CDFIs getting more of the funds, but they're also, the amount of capital that they're getting is definitely overseeing the amount of capital that Black and brown-led CDFIs are getting. And what's interesting about that is that there's also a lot of data that speaks to the fact that it is the Black and brown-led CDFIs that are supporting these underserved, vulnerable communities. And so this is definitely something that unfortunately speaks to one of the things that I try to lift up, which is that not only is it the communities of color, the individuals and the families that we're looking to really help to support, but we also have to think about the institutions that's situated in them, the ones that have close proximity to them, which are Black and brown-led institutions. And so so let's not forget about those who are closest to the individuals and the target folks that we're really trying to impact. Next slide, please. So one of the things that, for this specific webinar, what we really want to focus on is financial management and access to capital. We can't talk about one without talking about the other. And so while throughout today's event, we will touch on a lot of the challenges and opportunities, I really just want to ground this conversation on some of the key things that our partners in this really lifted up, which was one, there is definitely a need for some long-term flexible capital that CDFIs can use to really invest in their operational and infrastructure needs. This really speaks to the fact that having flexible capital means unrestricted capital for those who need to understand it in a different way. It also means that it allows them to be able to invest in things like technical assistance, extra holistic support that our CDFIs are known at providing that our traditional banks typically don't provide. Understanding that the clients that they're working with really need some of that hand-holding sometimes, and they might need some additional support to not only be successful in getting loans, but also just being successful into growing and having a sustainable type of business. The other thing is that there's some inconsistent and shifting in demands from various funders on metrics to report. And that really gets to some of the, not only the financial management, but also some of the data management that we will also get to a little bit later with one of our other webinars. But then there is some unfavorable lending and grant terms from funders across that really create additional burdens and costs that get passed down to the borrower. So really trying to think about some ways in which we can create some lending terms that's not so restrictive and provide some flexibility, not only for the CDFIs, but also to the clients that they are serving. Another thing that came true for our partners was making capital accessible to clients. And so really picking up on the fact that sometimes there are some criterias that are put in place by other stakeholders that make it just really challenging for our CDFIs to really support and meet their clients where they need to be met at. So how can we create some lending, some capital that's not so prescriptive, excuse me, as well as limiting just the way in which CDFIs are able to really support their clients. So really thinking about how can we create some products that really assist communities and entrepreneurs of color in particular to be able to take advantage of some of these services. The last two that I'll just speak on is just finding some ways to increase the loan size for applicants while also remaining flexible. We know that a lot of times banks, especially traditional banks, they're looking at their return investment. CFIs don't necessarily have that luxury because a lot of the loans that they're giving are small, but there is a way to have smaller loan size that's still flexible, just like I think there's some ways to create some products that they are able to increase their loan size while also being able to mitigate some of the risks in doing that. And lastly, working with underwriters on how risk is being measured is really difficult. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of biases with underwriting, and there's also just some ways in which we should reconsider what risk means and different ways of how we're valuing and defining risk. And so these are just a few of the distinct challenges that our, especially BIPOC-led CDFIs have lifted up as some of the things to consider when they're trying to think about how to really strengthen their financial management, as well as how to increase access to capital for themselves, as well as for the clients that they're serving. And so with that, I would like to go to the next slide. I believe I'm going to be transitioning back over to Joelle, where we're going to talk about just how much our partners have been resilient despite all of those challenges that I just lifted up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's dig into this. For financial management, the first thing that we talked about when we gathered our group of high impact CDFIs was discussing what visions for the future they saw. And we identified that as CDFIs envision a future where increased lending power expands their capacity to serve more small businesses. Next slide, please. So what that means once we get into the bulk of this discussion is the objectives for what we'll cover today is really understanding how collective negotiation, fund underwriting, and term agreements can truly impact lending for yourselves and from the loans that you're receiving from funders. Looking to opportunities from funders to really leverage their position as a platform and to be a conduit to small to mid-sized CDFIs, and truly understanding the expectations and work requirements that they place on smaller organizations. And lastly, we want to provide a space to acknowledge the operational and capacity challenges that you guys experience. BIPOC-led CDFIs experience additional administrative burdens, reporting requirements, and all that comes along with the additional funding that they receive. And we want to look to see what those collective assets may be within the group and how we may look at those as investments and find ways to mitigate some of these challenges. So next slide. Before we get into all of that, I'd like to see who all is in the room and get an understanding of where you guys are coming from. So within the chat, that little function that we pointed out to you earlier today, please use that to type in one word that names your biggest challenge with reporting financials for grants. And I'll give you all a minute or two to chime in, and I'll call out what comes in. And I'm sure a lot of things come to mind as you guys think of frustrations or maybe the work or capacity. Yep, here we go. I see cumbersome. money, especially when it's crunch time and you have so much work to do in addition to reporting. Accurate loan software, that's a big one. Finding ways to do that. Tedious, nuanced. Yeah, a lot of the different asks from various funders and trying to put that all together and report it out when people are asking for different ways and different outcomes and different requirements. Burdensome. Yeah, quite a bit. So this is what I was anticipating we would see. So I'm glad to know that my expectations aren't off base. So thank you guys for entertaining me with that. Consistent formatting as well. Yep, all these things we'll definitely talk to and kind of touch on that level as well. So with that, let's move on to the second question. So which option best describes the relationship with your funder? Is it A, amazing, B, formal, it's only an exchange of a need, C, collaborative, they're open to a working relationship? So go ahead and enter your poll. And we'll see your responses in real time. Give you guys a minute or two. If everyone has a working collaborative relationship with funding, that's amazing. I'm extremely impressed and surprised. But it looks like we closed the poll too soon. So let's try to drop it in the chat. So let's say A, B, or C. That's all you have to type in. What best describes your relationships with funders? Is it A, amazing, B, formal, or C, collaborative? And I'll wait to see some of the responses come in. Okay, we've got some B's and C's, formal and collaborative. That's good. Don't see any A's yet. Depends on the funder, very true, but a mix of B and C is what I'm seeing. Oh, I've got one A, all right, that's good. Need some optimism here. And maybe I'll get one or two more responses. Okay, done. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on now that I have a good understanding of where folks are in the room. I think we can really lean in to see where that is. But I'd like to introduce our amazing panelists and speakers that we'll have for the day. So first in order, we'll start with Felicia Rabel-Menenza. I'm sorry, I've been practicing. Who's our Chief Financial Officer from African Development Center. We have Shauna McLaren, the Senior Director of Partnerships and Strategic Initiatives at City First Enterprise, and Allison Power, the Director of Economic Opportunities at Capital Impact. So we are going to start with Felicia. I invite you to come on to camera and we'll go to the next slide and begin with challenges, limitations, and barriers. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and take it away.
Thank you, Joel. So hi, hello everybody. My name is Felicia Rabel-Menenza. I'm the CFO CEO at African Development Center of Minnesota, that I will refer to as ADC. I'm responsible for operations, compliance, financial strategies, and risk management. Multiple hats when it comes to a smaller organization. I'm pretty sure everybody can relate to this one. ADC is an African immigrant-led organization. We provide financial education, homeownership classes, credit counseling, business classes, business technical assistance, and both conventional and profit-based financing that is culturally appropriate for our target market. ADC is also SBA microloan and SBA community advantage lender. I would like to preface that what I'm going to share is mostly based on our experience. I'll start by the first slide, please. Sorry. Okay, so I will start by going over all of the challenges and the limitations, and then and in the second part of my presentation, I will talk about best practices. So there are many challenges for small CDFIs. We have to find money for operations, money for lending, and we have to spend that money within funders' guidelines, but also within our very own internal guidelines. So what are the funding types that are available and that are suitable for your organization? When looking for funding, keep your organization's strategy in mind. Certain fundings are in better alignment with your strategy. Each type of funding has pros and cons, and that is the reason why you should pick the funding that would have the biggest impact in advancing your organization's overall goals. For example, if your goal is to grow the balance sheet, you need to keep your loan in your books. Avoid loan purchase program. If your goal is to increase revenue and you are not worried about growing your assets, loan purchase program is your best options. Following are 6 types of funding that we've used. We have the grants. They come from private foundations, federal government, city, state, county. They contribute simultaneously to funding operations and funding activities, lending activities. But they require the highest amount of reporting from a financial point of view, but also from a demographic report. The data collection is really is the largest when it comes to grants. The second type of funding that we have used are program-related investment, also referred to as PRI. They are usually from private foundations. They have low interest rate between, I would say, 0 and 3%, and they have terms up to 10 years. The catch with the PRI is that they require a heavy demographic-based data reporting, but the financial reporting is lighter. So we have to pick and choose what we want to go for. The third type of funding that we can find as a small CDFI are the fixed rate direct loan. They are usually from the federal government, SBA. It is a streamlined reporting, but it's a very frequent reporting. You have the monthly, you have the quarterly, you have the annual report, and the focus is more on portfolio performance. The fourth type of funding that we have been using as well is a loan purchase program. A good way, this is a very good way to improve liquidity and create a streamlined fee income. The CDFI had to use their own money to lend, but then they get back the money that they can lend again afterwards once they sell the loan, the guaranteed part of the loan, to commercial bank who are looking for CRA lending credit. Then you have a fifth option would be partnership funding. This has grown very popular during COVID because some CDFIs struggled to deploy their funds. So a CDFI who doesn't have enough fund to deploy would approach a CDFI who is struggling to deploy their funds. They partner, and then it's a little more of a offer services for fee. It's a win-win situation. The funds are being deployed and the metrics are met. The last one the last type of funding that I would like to touch on are the bank lines of credit. I think they should be the last resort because they have variable rates and they are for short terms only. They are typically used to gap the bridge for operations. And last but not least, they are very sensitive in this increasing rate environment. So it's not the best option for CDFIs if they are looking for funding for the lending activity. Now, let's talk about the metrics and limitations. So what do funders look at when they review your request for funding? It varies based on the priorities of the funders. Following that, there are the standard questions that the funder would ask. Does the organization price their product to be sustainable? What type of products does the organization offer? Do they offer loans? Do they offer lines of credit? What size and for what purpose? What is the average cost of funds? How much does it cost per loan produced? Do you generate enough income to meet your obligations? How do the terms of your receivable match up against the terms of your obligations? How well do you serve your target market? Some funders restrict deployment of funds based on borrowers' gender, income, geographic residence. I mean, not DNA at this time, but I mean, we can imagine. So another limiting factor would be the organization's own internal guidelines. Lending terms, the restriction on loan size, borrower qualifications, risk management. Do the product we offer meet the need of the borrower in our target markets? Are the terms offered reasonable? What does reasonable mean? For example, SBA clearly states the maximum spread we can apply when we lend under the SBA program. At ADC, we have an increasing demand for our profit-based product to finance commercial real estate properties. The average price of a small real estate property is $350,000. If the borrower goes to a bank, they can amortize the loan over 20 to 25 years. But at ADC, we cannot go over 10 years per funder and also per internal guidelines. And we cannot offer balloon products either. That wouldn't be Sharia compliant. Funding restrictions from the get-go disqualify most of our potential borrowers interested in the profit-based product to purchase real estate because the monthly payment would be too high. So how do we mitigate risk? How do we mitigate risk, financial risk and compliance? Well, we try to do our best. That's all I can say. We sign up for, when we are looking for funding, we sign up for long-term fixed rate. We are looking at least 10 years, and I mean the lowest rate possible would be what we are looking at. We work on matching lending terms with our source of fund. We maintain a really strict scoring grid to determine what source of fund we're going to be using for what loan, for what borrower, and for what purpose. It's a real exercise that requires taking the time to know the program and to really apply the rules from both sides, from funder side and also from our internal rules. For example, if a borrower scores higher than the average risk in our portfolio, we try to seek for a guarantee program or use of non-recourse funds to fund that borrower. Next slide, please. So I have talked about the fundraising, diversification of what is that, a portfolio and funding types, and I will touch on the opportunities to work together, to collaborate between CDFIs. That the first part I talked about was about deploying, working together to deploy each other's fund if there are struggles or if there are shortages with other CDFIs. Now I would like to touch on best practices. Could you please go to the next slide? Oh, sorry, I apologize for that. Best practices. So know your funders. Build strong relationships with your contact at the funder. That individual is going to be your best advocate. Be ready at all times to answer the questions about what the funders look at. Know the financial strengths and the weaknesses of your organization. Make sure to mention how you mitigate your weaknesses. Do not be afraid to pass up a funding offer if the terms are not in alignment with what you need or with your mission. Diversify your source of funds. Diversify your portfolio from an industry point of view. Avoid borrower concentration. Set a good monitoring process for borrower exposure. Seek other organizations with similar mission to partner with. Share the work and spread the risk. You can be creative with capacity funding. An example I would like to share is the relationship between Stearns Bank and ADC. Stearns Bank was looking to service better the increasing African immigrant community in their geographical footprint, and ADC was looking for more capacity to serve the community in the same geographic area. What ended up happening is that Stearns Bank hired an individual who dedicates 50% of his time to doing ADC work in that specific geographic area, and in return, Stearns Bank receives CRA credit. And Stearns Bank receives CRA credit. We meet each other's need, and the result of it is a stronger African community in the St. Cloud geographic area. Thank you for listening to what I had to say. I know my topic is far from being glamorous, and I hope you have some good takeaway. When you receive the material, please take a minute to read about the Lake Street Coliseum project. It is a very good example that showcases how collaboration between mission-based CDFI provided leverage in funding flexibility. The link is provided in the material. Without further ado, I will pass the baton to the next presenter. And that would be Shauna, I think.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Felicia, and hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shauna McLaren. I'm the Senior Director of Partnerships and Strategic Initiatives at City First Enterprises, which is a long title that just means that I'm involved with organization-wide projects for financing, technology, and strategic planning. And City First Enterprises is a nonprofit CDFI that focuses on commercial real estate and small business lending. And we've been headquartered in Washington, D.C. for almost 30 years. And we're proud to offer financing for affordable housing, community facilities, green energy construction, and working capital for small businesses. And so if we go to the next slide here, we'll dive into some additional topics, opportunities, and levers that we as CDFIs can take advantage of when negotiating a better deal for ourselves and for our borrowers. The negotiating lending terms, some of the tips that I'm going to share, you may have just heard from Felicia, but I think they bear repeating. I have a top 10 list that I have compiled from experience and from talking from others in the industry as well. So the first one, as Felicia mentioned, is start building those lending relationships early. Those are really important. The relationships do make a difference, and get to know the banks and credit unions, universities, corporations in your area that may share your mission and have aligned values. Also, ask for money when you don't need it. It takes about 3 to 4 months to close one facility, so you definitely don't want to wait until you're desperate for funds. You want to be negotiating from a position of strength, and ask for more money than what you need, within reason, of course. There's no magic formula there, but hopefully you ask for more with the goal of getting something within the range that you actually need. And so the fourth tip is then know what you need, and then have your loan package ready for that. One of the important documents to have ready is your deployment projections, to let the funder know exactly how you're going to use the funds. They may have special pricing and a special pool of funds depending on who you're going to serve, the geography, demographics, etc. Number 5 is try to have a mix of term loans and lines of credit that can address both your lending needs and your operational needs. Number 6 is to get to know the CDFIs in your area so that you can ask CDFIs that you're friendly with, or CDFIs even in other markets, about the types of loan terms that they were able to get from their funders. You know, hopefully we're all partners in this industry trying to make positive impact, and sometimes it's surprising what CDFIs will share with each other. Number 7 is be the first one to propose terms. So be clear about what you're asking for. For example, we need $1 million at 3% over 5 years. Sometimes that's the best way to let a funder know exactly what you're looking for, and it may influence what they offer you. It is easier to negotiate covenants than negotiating loan terms. So perhaps you'll have more leverage if the funder is asking for a 30% net asset ratio, perhaps you can ask for a 20% ratio instead, because that is more standard in the industry. Also for reporting, you may just want to let the funder know what reporting requirements you have with other lenders. I know many people said the reporting requirements were burdensome, so perhaps if you could just create the same sort of reports for each one of your facilities, that might make it a little bit more efficient. Tip number 9 is try not to have more than 5 to 7 funders at one time, because it gets too burdensome, too hard to manage with so many funders. If you are working with small regional banks in your area, you may want to consider a funds pooling agreement. I'm not an expert on this type of document, but others have told me that it's a document that allows you to or it's one document that all the banks that you're working with will agree to. So everybody has the same terms and the same reporting requirements. I'm told that it is a lot more work up front, but in the long run, because everybody's governed by the same agreement, it really can be more efficient in the long run. So something to consider there. And last but not least is to don't get emotional. Try to be creative. As Felicia mentioned, there's a lot to consider outside of just loans, and many different types of loans, but you can also ask for grants. You can consider selling your loans to raise capital, perhaps offer investment notes or bonds, and then consider forming a coalition or collaboration with other CDFIs to raise funds as a group. And Allison Powers will speak more to that in just a moment. But so once you've negotiated your loan and you're ready to deploy those funds, like how is all of this work going to benefit your borrowers? So the first one is obvious. I think if you can secure a lower cost of capital, then you can pass those savings on to your borrowers. If your loan covenants are less restrictive, perhaps you can take on more risk. You can lend to a larger diversity of borrowers, maybe startups, as well as more established businesses, and have more flexible lending guidelines overall for your borrowers. Also, if you don't have to invest as much time and resources in things like reporting, and then hopefully you can invest more time into outreach and technical assistance. And you can also spare having to bother your borrowers with gathering so much demographic data. We know sometimes that data can be very invasive and not everybody wants to provide it. So if you can be specific with your lenders about what the needs are for your community, perhaps you can make it a little bit easier on your borrowers in that regard. And then you can also invest more time in that relationship building with your borrowers as well as other partners. So, and by having that time to build relationships with other CDFIs or partners, you're really creating an ecosystem for your borrowers, right? So if you can work with a group of CDFIs to help a particular borrower find a solution within your group to help their specific needs, then this builds trust between the organizations and it builds borrowers' trust in the system, because most of our borrowers that we work with have been declined once or more times, and they may have lost confidence or lost hope that an organization truly is there to help them. And so if they can just go to one CDFI and then be connected to multiple partners with different specializations, then they don't have to spend the time hunting for a solution for themselves. We're here to provide them with that solution, whether it comes from us or another partner. And these partnerships can also lead to a whole clearinghouse of tools. Perhaps, some CDFIs have banded together to compile the tools that they use, or have a centralized calendar of webinars, or come together to do marketing together. So, for instance, I've been part of a group where I created a lending matrix. It was just an Excel spreadsheet with all of the loan terms and document requirements and some of the key factors for borrowers to consider for each of the CDFIs in my market. And if somebody was shopping around, I could tell them about my program as well as others and share this information so that they could see everything at a glance, and makes it a little bit easier for people that way, because it is a full-time job looking for financing, whether you're a CDFI or a business owner. Also, similarly, a centralized calendar of events can help a borrower find a webinar for their specific need. And it helps boost the brand awareness for everybody involved, and it may increase the attendance for all events. So hopefully those were some helpful tips. On the next slide, we will take a look at some recommendations for funders and investors. As CDFIs in this great industry, we do have the opportunity to influence what funders and investors may do in the future. And so if we are consistent in what we're asking for as a group, that may impact how investors and funders operate with regards to offering us funds and asking for reporting and data in return. So I have just a few points on this slide. So first, of course, increase resources, especially for smaller CDFIs. We don't have all of the resources for marketing and research and outreach. So some of the larger funders and banks, they have a lot of experts in all of those areas. Perhaps they can, as part of their funding, can provide consultant support for marketing or technology. I've worked with a bank that has shared some of their market data so that we could better understand our market. They've offered co-marketing. A larger bank also sponsored a tech platform to help streamline referrals of their declined bank borrowers to local CDFIs that had more underwriting flexibility. It helped them maintain the relationship as well as just make it a better experience for their borrower. We can ask funders and investors to standardize their metrics, excuse me. Like Felicia talked about, reporting for each of the funding sources is extensive and burdensome. Some larger CDFIs have successfully told certain funders that they won't agree to any additional reporting requirements beyond what they currently offer. Because it is too much of a burden on the CDFI and their borrowers. So it is possible to ask funders to just accept the data that we already collect. Again, this could be addressed by a funds pooling agreement. But if enough CDFIs collaborated or are banded together, perhaps we can convince certain funders to have just a standardized reporting requirement. That may be a pipe dream, but you know, we are here to impact the future. And lastly, once we collect all of this data, funders should consider having a centralized way to store it across the market, across the industries. You know, this may not be a private institution, it may be something on a governmental level, but having that centralized database to share certain metrics can help the whole ecosystem identify trends, gaps, and opportunities. So it's something really we may want to ask for more in the future. And data reporting will be further discussed in the third webinar, but hopefully these ideas are helpful in terms of recommendations when you're working with other funders. And at this point, I will turn it over to Allison Power to discuss the power of collaborations. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Shauna. Can everybody hear me? All right. Again, my name is Allison Powers. I'm the Director of Economic Opportunities at Capital Impact Partners. We are a national CDFI that is headquartered in DMV, but we work nationally. Our primary focus is on food, affordable housing, aging, cooperative development, and education. Our organization is a Black-led CDFI that has a deep focus on racial justice and really working and listening to the communities that we serve. Today, I'm going to talk, and you can go to the next slide, please. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Nourish DC Collaborative. The Nourish DC Collaborative has been.
Hey, Allison, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you mute and unmute? Your mic is whistling, and I just want to make sure everybody can hear what you're saying because your content is really great.
Everyone hear me now? Is that better?
No. Give us 2 seconds. Let's try to fix the sound because it's a little bit difficult to hear that way. So give us 2 seconds and bear with us. We appreciate your patience. Hang on. Try going to your audio settings, Allison. There we go. Much better.
Okay, great. All right. So I was just saying, next slide, please. Today I will be discussing the Nourish DC Collaborative. And about 1.5 years ago, we were chosen to be the fund manager of Nourish DC, the purpose of which is to support the development of a robust ecosystem of locally owned food businesses, especially in neighborhoods underserved by grocery or other food businesses. And if you're located in DC, this is primarily wards 5, 7, and 8. And it's not only about access, it's also about economic prosperity and job creation. And we also have a focus on locally owned businesses, especially those owned by people of color. So I'm here to talk a little bit more about the collaborative model. First, I'll start with kind of how the program got started. This program is anchored by the city, and we've talked about a lot of different kinds of funding today, but city funding can be very different. First of all, there is usually a pretty long runway to get this sort of funding. It was a pretty a multi-year process to really engage the city and get them interested in providing funding for a program like Nourish. In the meantime, we got funding from private philanthropy to do market research and really envision the structure of a program like this. We had previously been a fund manager for the Michigan Good Food Fund and the California Freshworks Fund. So we had proof of concept. We had done these sorts of collaboratives before, but we know we needed to do this very specifically about DC and for the communities and markets we wanted to serve here. We also really engaged the DC Food Policy Council. This is a group, and different cities have food policy councils, which is, public, private, citizen, really support food justice and food access in all different capacities. So they were really helping to advocate for funding for this program. And when the funding was finally earmarked in the mayor's budget, they released an RFP that we had to, even though we had been speaking about this for a long time, we had to apply for the funds and prove we were the best stewards of the finances. And luckily, we had already done this market research. We had already chosen our partners, so we had all the pieces in place to apply. So the city has been a great partner. They really have a huge megaphone. So when you launch a program with the city, it kind of gets an immediate credibility, and they have a lot of different outlets for kind of announcements and right away the program kind of hits the ground running. So that is a huge advantage. You do have to be very aware that city funding does usually come with a lot of metrics and responsibilities. These are taxpayer dollars, so ultimately you really have to be very aware in case they're audited, and really collect every receipt, whether it's from yourselves or subgrantees. We've also gotten funding from several other private foundations, but we've been very aware that since we do have these very bulky metrics from the city, that we want to align them. And I know some of my co-presenters talked about this earlier, that the city metrics are really the metrics we are collecting for Nourish DC. And when other funders want to support the program, we say these are the metrics we can offer, and these are the timeframes we can do it in them, because we know it is really cumbersome for ourselves as a fund manager and our partners in this collaborative to collect those metrics. I know we've talked about metrics a lot today. Next slide, please. So this chart really shows the structure of Nourish DC. You can see the funds come from DEMPED, which is a agency in Washington, DC. We are the fund manager, but then we have these other collaborative partners, the Washington Area Community Investment Fund, or WACIF, the Latino Economic Development Center, LEDC, Dreaming Out Loud, Eats Place, City First Enterprises, and Shauna is and her organization are partners on this program, and our partner, CDC Small Business Finance. This chart kind of shows how the funding flows, but it is really collaborative. We meet frequently, we have discussions around key program areas, we all review grants together, we deploy capital, and we were very intentional about selecting partners for this work. We did, as I said before, we did a lot of market research, and part of that was an RFP process where we asked potential partners about goals, technical assistance, lending amounts, what were their pipeline of food transactions, what were their financing gaps, what were they looking for out of a collaborative like this. And the goal was really to have CDFIs that would complement each other in terms of, you know, lending amounts. We like to say that Nourish DC, we can finance anything from 5,000 to 10 million. So that's a really wide range we're trying to cover with different organizations and different types of loans. Also differences in population served, geography, sector expertise, technical assistance. Most of these organizations are CDFIs. One is just a technical assistance provider, not just, but we all also do technical assistance as well. So we really want to have not only the continuum of capital, but a wide range of expertise. Next slide, please. This last slide is kind of an overview of Nourish DC and the services we collectively offer. It's a three-pronged approach to creating impact. The first is a range of financial products to meet the financing needs of food entrepreneurs of all different shapes and sizes. We've deployed over $15 million collectively in the past 8 months. And again, I don't think we'd be able to get to that impact without the collaborative structure. We've given technical assistance in all different shapes and sizes to over 200 food businesses. And we have provided 22 BIPOC-owned food businesses with almost $1 million in grant funding to help grow and scale their businesses. So, you know, there's a lot of benefits to working in a collaborative structure. It's really a chance to be able to share resources and kind of understand what's going on in the larger picture of, you know, your city or nationally or whatever the issue that you're collectively working on. It really provides a wide range of expertise so organizations can help kind of build up their systems and structures and explore different areas they want to work, exchanging information with partner organizations. It is a real way to build trust and explore other partnerships. And really, you know, let's face it, a lot of CDFIs, we compete for funding and oftentimes deals. So this is really a way to you know, come together and build that trust and be able to share underwriting guidelines and things like that. It's also a good opportunity for there to be a range of opinions and voices in the room. Like I said before, you know, we've given out almost $1 million in grants, and that is, we all have reviewers from all the organizations that score the applications. We talk about it together and really have these textured, nuanced conversations because there are all these different voices in the room. It also allows for more efficiency. You know, you're not duplicating efforts, and you can help kind of streamline, whether that's, you know, loans coming in and everybody discussing who will be following up with that loan, or, you know, webinars or technical assistance or things like that. It's also a great way to problem solve and react to changing circumstances. This program was launched during the pandemic, and a few sectors were as hard hit as food during the health and economic crisis. And so we had, as CDFIs, we had to constantly be you know, reacting and figuring out what the businesses needed to not only survive and thrive, and how they needed to pivot. So it was great to kind of be in this learning environment during that time. Also, we've talked a lot about funding today. Funders are drawn to to collaboratives that are run efficiently, because together we can make a greater impact and really streamline our efforts. It also helps raise awareness about the needs of whatever you are collaboratively doing together. For us, it's the food ecosystem. What are the gaps and opportunities? And it's also a way for us to have a platform with the city, who is our primary funder. There are, of course, challenges in working in a collaborative model. I'd say one of the main ones is just logistical. Setting up the systems can be challenging. There's a lot of working with multiple organizations. There's kind of a lot of things you have to put into place. And so you really do need someone who's a fund manager, someone who will be leading the efforts and creating the content for everyone to react to. Also capacity issues. Oftentimes, while you might be funding other organizations, in terms of staff time, a lot of times that will be going to, technical assistance or more lending capacity. And we've talked about metrics before. It is a pain point. I would say one thing that is beneficial is, when you figure out what the metrics are going to be, to collective buy-in of the group and really figure out what everybody can do and not do ahead of time. Also, we do a lot of trainings periodically before people are submitting their metrics, because there's always turnover and questions, and really speak with people if we have questions about their metrics. I'll just talk about two final points. One is something that we have in this Nourish DC collaborative is a flexible capital pool. This is a pool of funding for gap financing that can be accessed by anyone that is in the collaborative. So it can be for, really whatever the lender needs it to be. It can be for a loan loss reserve, a guarantee. It can be equity. It can be for like a new markets tax credit consultant. And it really helps get these deals get off the finish line. And we collectively created a screening memo together, and we approve the individual transactions that will get this flexible capital to make sure they're aligned with the intent of the program. So that's kind of a pool of funding that is shared between all of us as the deals come through. We already have grant agreements in place and can kind of be reactive to get people funds to get the deals across the finish line, because food deals oftentimes have gaps, and especially when we are trying to fund locally owned food businesses. So lastly, I will say that I think the biggest lesson learned from the last 18 months is that the need for flexibility and adaptation with a collaborative like this, that you're kind of, no matter how much planning you do, and we actually did do quite a bit of planning before this was launched, you really need to be able to make changes and kind of build the plane while flying with a program like this, because the landscape changes, sometimes the partners can change, sometimes your funders can shift, and I think this was also mentioned before, you have to have a clear vision of what you're doing and what you want to achieve. So even if you're attracting new funders, you're also staying true to the goals and direction of the program. And the final thing I'll say is, I think really with any program, but especially with the collaboration, communications is really important. It's something we're still working on. I'll actually maybe put a little video in the chat if I can. But I think, not only is the metrics important, but the storytelling, videos, really, kind of collectively telling the story of what you're doing together. And with that, I will pass it back over to Prosperity now.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to invite all of our speakers to actually come back on camera. We're going to open it up for a group discussion and Q&A, and we've got 2 questions so far. I do have a couple in my back pocket that I can get to you if we have time. So first, let's start with the first question that came in, which is, are there any statistics on minority CDFI financial support from local and state government? So I think I'll start with Allison, because you said this was a DC government supported program. So maybe was there an indicator from seeing that and where you might find that type of information? Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Okay, sorry, I was just putting our little video in the chat. And the question was that for city and state resources in terms of supporting CDFIs, Black-led CDFIs, was that?
I think so. So the question was, are there any statistics on minority CDFI financial support from local and state government?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I could, you know, I'm sure somebody in my organization knows and could get back to you. I will say that, you know, as I said, we are a Black-led CDFI, and I know that, you know, especially over the past few years with the increasing focus on racial justice and a lot of city policy, city and state policy trying to align with that, there has been more of a focus on kind of getting those dollars out, but I don't know the statistics, but I can try to get that and get back to you.
Okay, thanks. And maybe I'll pass this over to Felicia. I know you've worked with the city of St. Paul or Minnesota in some of those funding aspects, so I wonder if there's some information there that you could share.
So each city has their very own lending program that CDFIs can partner with, but the one we have often used has been the one with the city of Minneapolis. It is a 2% loan program, so the city lends directly to the borrower, but we at ADC we then service the loan. We carry it on our balance sheet, and it's a very as long as the business is located within the limits of the city of Minneapolis. A business can apply for it, and the use has to be either to grow a business or to do a facade renovation. Those are all acceptable use of the funds. It's not designed for startups, though.
Noted. And Shauna, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't really have too much experience to add there, so I think Allison and Felicia really provided the most relevant info they have.
All right, and just as a plug, we do have some interesting probably points and statistics that you might find in our playbook around funding sources and rates of funding for MDIs and CDFIs led by communities of color. So there's definitely some gems and research in the playbook. So I highly recommend everyone to take a look at that and see if it may provide some helpful context in what you're looking for. So moving on to our second question is, what can the CDFI fund do to improve data and metric demands around Black and Brown-led CDFIs? Says Treasury has a comment period open soliciting feedback on the CDFI program applications. How can we amplify these needs in our comments? So I think with that, I will open it up. Whoever's interested in answering that first, I'll let you guys join.
I'll just say one of the tips that was shared on the slide that I spoke to was about sharing data and having a centralized system to share the data that is collected amongst the CDFIs. So I think that would be really important for the CDFI fund to hear, is to share as much data as possible so that we do have more visibility of what is going, or what data is being collected by Black and Brown-led CDFIs, and how our work is impacting the industries and the borrowers that we serve.
Thank you. Allison, Felicia, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. Well, then with that, if you guys have more questions, feel free to add those in the chat, but I'm going to go to, oh, we do have one more question that we're taking. So this one is, we are a collaborative of local CBOs working with a commercial bank. The CDFIs were reticent to take loan products from the bank due to higher interest rates and the residual COVID monies they had received. There is no appetite by CDFIs for more debt. What strategies to engage the bank to lend/grant toward CDFIs? Or what are strategies to engage the bank to lend or grant toward CDFIs? Let's start with you, Felicia.
So in our experience, commercial banks have always been looking for whatever product or services can be reported on their CRA report. So banks are held accountable for community reinvestment. They have to meet 3 different criteria. The first one would be service, the second one would be investment, and the third one would be, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thoughts. But anyway, commercial banks they need to meet a certain rating to show that they are reinvesting in the community they're doing business in. And that's how ADC was able then to partner with Stearns Bank, because they wanted to maintain their outstanding rating from CRA. So to do that, they needed to be able to reach out a little more to lend more to the growing African immigrant community in their geographical footprint. And so what they did now is that they earmarked 10 million for ADC to do lending with to specifically our target market, so the African immigrant community in St. Cloud. And so they give us the money that we lend out. There is no interest or anything like that they charge us, but the requirement is just that part, that it has to be lent. It has to be to do loan for the African community in St. Cloud. They then can report that as for their CRA lending, and therefore keep their lending scoring high. So that is a way that we have somewhat been able to partner with commercial banks to get some funding with very little, with still doing our mission, meeting our target market, and very flexible guidelines, because all of the underwriting guidelines are ours. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to put another plug in for the playbook, because we do talk about CRA credits and how reinvesting in the community through collaboratives based on whose interest in those credits can really help fund some of the additional sources of capital that you can use, and how to further integrate some of the services that you need to provide through partnership. But on that note, I have one more question I'd like to ask, and this is specific to Allison and Shauna, because you guys are in this collaborative together, is what strategies or advice can you share for finding similar valued organizations on collaboratives, like how you guys found that opportunity together, and maybe, Allison, how you began recruitment and finding organizations to meet the needs, the lending needs, or whatever it was that you were looking for Norris DC.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that if you are working in especially in a geography, but also, you know, in a certain sector, a lot of times, you know, the usual players, right? Like you will have, I think almost all of the people in the collaborative we had worked with on other grants. City First, for example, we had, I know, you know, there's been talk of Wells Fargo earlier, Open for Business Fund. We also got Open for Business Fund funds, and some of those were subgranted to City First to primarily help them build up some of their technical assistance capacity. So we really knew that some of this work was happening and that they would be a great partner for Nourish DC, and they also helped kind of fill a funding gap we had, you know, again, trying to get to that continuum of capital. But so I'd say that we knew a lot of the players. They were either already friends or kind of friends of friends, but then we really had to get into the nitty gritty of how did we work together and how did we complement each other. And so that was, you know, that kind of mini RFP process we did, of really, even though some of them were good friends and allies, you know, sending them out a really brief, you know, a brief kind of, it wasn't a questionnaire, but, you know, having them almost submit a proposal and saying, you know, this is what your vision is, this is what your pipeline is like, this is what you'd be able to do, this is your capacity, what's your ability to, you know, what are your gaps, what are your challenges, how do you work with partners? And then we had follow-up conversations, then we sat down and really thought about who could be our partners. And just because you work with somebody or they're your friends doesn't necessarily mean they'd be the best partner. So it really had to be, it was, you know, kind of knowing who might be the good partners, but then really digging down and getting the concrete information on, were they going to be the right fit? Did they have the capacity? And did we all have the same vision?
Yeah, and to add to what Allison said, I think a pretty cool thing about Nourish DC is that members of the collaborative, we obviously don't all do the same thing. There's a good diversity of products and services that are offered by each CDFI. So some of us really focus on technical assistance, others focus on very early stage or startups, others focus on medium-sized or more established businesses. Some of us can do real estate type of deals, and so it's really a broad offering, which I also think is beneficial to borrowers. As I spoke to on my slides, by offering so many solutions, hopefully one of us within the group can be the right fit for somebody looking for financing or technical assistance. And then outside of just your own immediate network or friends of friends, you know, OFN is obviously a very good source to find CDFIs, and you'll have to do research on their website to see if they have aligned mission and values, or just reach out to them and have a quick conversation. The CDFI fund, you know, sourcing by state, those are all good resources to find good potential partners.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. So I want to thank all of our speakers for coming on today. You guys were phenomenal and really dropped some gems. So I hope everyone picked up some jewels, some key insights, and some feedback that you could apply. So I'll let you guys go off camera and we can continue on with the next slide. So now that we are wrapping up, we talked about collective negotiations, funding negotiations, ecosystem driving, financial support through like CRA credits and collaboratives and other opportunities. What we didn't get to was measures of success. So I do suggest everyone, folks, again, plugging the playbook, take a look at that. And really the measures of success was not just about what the CDFIs can do, but how funders can assess their own behavior and their own metrics to really understand whether the impact in their funding is actually making the impact that they hope it will. and looking at the different aspects and capacities of measures of success to really evaluate whether the work that's being done is effective and leaning toward these long-term goals. But moving forward, we can go on to next steps because we have some great additional webinars following this one. So next week on Monday, May 8th, will be our technical assistance and networks webinar. We'll be talking about understanding the ecosystem, the strategies for long-term and financial programmatic planning for CDFIs, and we'll close out our series with data management. On Wednesday, May 17th, we'll talk about data-driven strategies for BIPOC CDFIs and looking to overcome some of those challenges and maximizing that impact. And lastly, with our next slide, I want to talk about our mentor and coaching opportunity. So everyone had the opportunity to sign up in our registration form. If you did not do that already, we'll be sending a post-webinar survey and asking folks if you're interested in receiving coaching from Felicia or Shauna and the rest of our guest speakers in this series. So if you're interested, please fill that out, but all parties should be in attendance for all 3 webinars. So even if you weren't able to attend live, if you go back and watch this recording, that will count as well. But we want to make sure you all have a good understanding in the context of what information is being provided before you have your time with a coach. And last thing is we'll be doing a follow-up search for everyone who says they're interested. Since we do have limited slots, we'll be following up with folks between May 22nd and May 31st to get this started on June. So as soon as June 1st comes, we're doing scheduling that availability out, and each section or each coaching session will be 1 hour and 30 minutes, and it's a one-time only. So it's really first come, first serve. So we're looking to fill those slots as soon as possible. Once we get folks in and follow up with everyone and you receive that booking link through Calendly, you'll be able to look at their availability and look at yours and book it right away. And we are trying to limit the amount of time where people can reschedule because it's limited to 1 month only. So there's a lot coming up. So look out for the follow-up survey if you're interested, and please be sure to stay tuned for our follow-up webinars next week and the week after, since this is a series and it all relates to our playbook, which you can find on our website. You can just type in playbook, it'll come right up, Strengthening Black Entrepreneurship. So with that, I'd like to pass this off to Lotta to finish out with our next steps and ways for you all to continue to be involved with Prosperity Now.
Hi, as always, next steps, visit our Advocacy Center to stay up to date with our advocacy efforts. Please complete the survey, especially if you're looking into the coaching. Sign up for one of our networks to stay in the know about the issues you care about, and let us know what your suggestions for future calls are. The Prosperity Now community currently has 4 networks going on: the Financial Security Network, Affordable Housing Network, and Taxpayer Opportunity Network, and the Campaign for Every Kid's Future / Child Savings Account. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad we were a part of your day. Please complete the survey on your way out. Thank you.